Our second presenter is Bert Hickman, who is Director of Research for Run Ministries, a ministry that equips first-generation Christian leaders from the Global South by providing evangelistic media tools, a culturally sensitive discipleship model, and practical skills for their ministries to become self-sustaining and multiply as church planting movements. He also is a research associate with the Center for the Study of Global Christianity, where he spent 10 years before joining Run. He currently is an associate editor for the Edinburgh Companions to Global Christianity series, and previously served as associate editor for the Atlas of Global Christianity and an associate editor for the World Christian Encyclopedia, 3rd edition. So Bert's now going to share with us an approach to steps of data gathering based on his years of experience in missions research. Welcome, Bert. Over to you.
Thank you. Let's see, are you pulling up my presentation or am I putting that up?
You, please.
Me, all right. So I'm talking about steps of data gathering this morning, and that's one component of research, as Chris has already shown us. And it really begs the question as we start, why do we gather data? And you can see a number of reasons are listed here on the screen. The first rule is that it helps us to inform and shape strategy and decision-making processes. And by gathering and analyzing data, we can actually gain insights into things like demographics and cultural context and the religious landscape of an area that we're ministering in. And this information actually can guide the selection of appropriate outreach models and the development of contextualized approaches to ministry and the identification of potential barriers or opportunities for growth in our outreach. That's also useful for assessment and evaluation. And research provides a means for us to, as our outreach grows and multiplies, to measure progress and impact of what we're doing, what God is doing. Research methodologies like surveys and interviews and focus groups can help gather feedback from people like church members and community leaders and other stakeholders. And the data that we gather then can be used to evaluate how effective our strategies are, identify areas for improvement, and track the growth and multiplication of new churches. And moreover, research goes beyond just assessing numerical growth. It also helps us focus on holistic transformation in the lives of individuals and whole communities. And then research helps promote learning and knowledge sharing within the large church planning and outreach mission community. So by documenting and sharing success stories, the lessons that we learned, and the best practices that we've developed, workers can benefit from the experience of others. And this exchange of information helps foster collaboration and prevent duplication of efforts, which is really important, and ensures that the work continues to innovate and adapt in a rapidly changing world. Now, research is also crucial in identifying systemic issues and addressing them appropriately. It allows researchers to uncover root causes and social dynamics that might hinder growth in a ministry area. And through rigorous analysis, areas like cultural barriers, theological challenges, and socio-political complexities can be identified. And with this understanding, leaders then can work toward developing targeted solutions and provide the necessary training and resources to help overcome these barriers. And research also contributes to credibility and legitimacy. Right now, skepticism and scrutiny are widely prevalent in our world. And so rigorous research helps provide evidence of impact and effectiveness of our mission work. By conducting studies with proper methodologies and adhering to ethical standards and publishing research findings, workers can build trust and gain the respect of donors and partner organizations and the wider church community. And robust research done in collaboration with academic institutions or respected research organizations, like the Center for the Study of Global Christianity, help adds an additional layer of credibility to the findings. So let's go to, oh no, one more thing is empowerment, sorry. Empowerment helps local leaders and believers take ownership of both the research process and the ministry. By involving them in data collection processes, analysis, and decision-making, research becomes a tool for empowerment and capacity building. And local leaders can contribute their insights, their perspectives, and their contextual understanding. That ensures that research is conducted with cultural sensitivity and relevance. And this not only enhances the quality of research, but also fosters a sense of ownership and collaboration in the community. So research can have a lot of different effects. Data gathering can have many different effects. Let's go to the next slide. Oh, I'm going to the next slide.
You're controlling that, yeah?
I'm controlling it, yeah. And so let's look at some aspects of data gathering. And you can see the data collection is on this list, but it's way down at the bottom of the list, that there are actually many different aspects to data gathering that we have to consider. They include preparation, designing the research instruments, figuring out how we're going to do sampling, standardization processes and measures, accountability, translation if it's needed, security, and equipping the data collectors to then actually go out and do the data collection. So let's start off with preparation here. Preparation is really the first step, and it involves establishing the purposes and the goals of the research that we're going to do. And it helps us identify the specific research questions that we're going to be addressed. We really need to know what we're doing, why we're doing it, and what we're going to ask as part of the process before we can go out and do any data collection. So it's important to gather background information as well, things that people have already researched or published on the area that we're studying, whether it's a geography or a people group or a language, so that we can inform the steps that come after the preparation steps. And during the preparation phase, we need to gain a clear understanding of contextual factors that can impact our research and the plans that we have. This includes cultural and socioeconomic and political dynamics and historical and geographical considerations. And those contextual awareness that we then develop enables us to tailor our data collection methods so that we can interpret the findings within the appropriate framework. Because if we don't know the context of the environment that we're studying, we could collect data and draw totally wrong conclusions because we don't understand the area that we're looking at. So when we've done our preparation, we know the area that we're studying and the people that we're studying, we can design research instruments that will help us collect the data. And those fall into two categories, qualitative and quantitative data. Qualitative instruments help us uncover the stories and narratives that provide insights into what God is doing. And so that involves designing things like interview protocols, focus group guides, and observation tools. Interviews will typically be for one-on-one gathering of data. Focus groups where you have a small group of people that you might not get as much depth of information, but you'll get much more breadth of information. Then observation tools, things where you're not necessarily interviewing people, but you're actually watching them to see what they do, how they interact, and to gain information that way. And then quantitative instruments are things like surveys and questionnaires, things that help you collect numerical data, or things that collect information where you present a survey to someone that has a limited number of choices. And instead of in the qualitative instruments where they can be open-ended, you ask someone a question and you let them answer however they like. In the quantitative surveys and questionnaires, you'll typically have a few answer choices and the people will select from those. And these can be administered in person or they can be done something like through the mail or online. So what you really want there is clarity, simplicity, and unbiased wording to ensure that you're gathering data in an appropriate way. And you also want to make sure that you have the right sample size and sampling techniques to ensure that you get a representative a data sample. We'll talk about that a little bit more now. Sampling is important because in most cases, you're not going to be able to talk to everybody. You won't be able to talk to everybody in a country, certainly, or in a province. You might not even be able to talk to everyone in a church or in a village. And so you have to determine, how am I going to pick a sample of people to talk to that will give me the information I want, but will represent accurately the population that I'm studying in terms of things like age, makeup, gender, makeup, if it's multiple different ethnicities or languages, different socioeconomic groups. And so you can do that two different ways. You can use a probability sampling or a non-probability sampling. Probability sampling is one of those techniques is random sampling, where everyone has an equal chance of being selected. And you can do this, and there are a number of different techniques for this. I don't have time to go into, but in probability sampling, basically everybody has an equal chance of being picked. In non-probability sampling, you target the people that you want to talk to. And so that can often get you information that you desire from those specific people, but the downside is that you miss other people who might have relevant information, or other types of people. Like if you only talk to leaders, you might have more access to the leaders, but you miss the perspective of the regular people in the village or in the church. You have to determine the size, and again, there are ways to determine how many people do you need to talk to in order to get a representative sample and an accurate sample. And again, as I mentioned, representativeness involves making sure that your sample looks like the community that you're actually surveying. So the next step then is standardization. And really, standardization comes in at least two different places. It comes in data collection and in data review. In data collection, you want to make sure that you have standard operating procedures, or ways that data collectors are told to collect the data that they follow. So protocols for them, templates that they use to record data. And this is important so that it minimizes bias that might be introduced by the researcher. And it minimizes errors. If you have a standard way of doing things and a standard way of recording information, then it's less likely that you'll have errors in your data collection come in. It also allows you to compare different study populations, like different churches or different villages. And it helps you draw conclusions, because if you've got data standardization, you can combine data from these different populations and draw a conclusion about the whole population, as well as the individual, again, villages or churches, for example. Data review is important because you don't want to wait necessarily until the end of data collection in order to look and see, do you have good, accurate data? Do you have data that makes sense? Data review helps you validate and verify that the data being collected are actually the data that you want to be collected. You might find out that one or more of the data collectors didn't understand things as well as you thought, and they're not getting complete information, or they're not getting the right information. It also shows you how accurate and reliable the data are. You can go through and look at them as they're being collected and see, do these really reflect, do they make sense? Or do they bring out new challenges to the things that you thought they should be? And is that because it really is different than you thought, or is it, again, because somebody's not collecting things correctly? And it's a great opportunity for feedback to give to data collectors. If you're the data collector, then that's not as big an issue. But if you have other people working for you collecting data, it allows you to dialogue with them about how the data collection is taking place, and their experience of it, and are they experiencing any problems in the collection. So the next step here is accountability. And accountability is really making sure that people are implementing the mechanisms to ensure that the data collectors are adhering. So it goes along with the standardization. It's the other side of standardization. you have a procedure that collectors are supposed to use. Are they actually using those procedures? And regular check-ins with the supervisors and review can help them know that they're doing what they need to be doing. And you need to define what are those reporting channels, who reports to whom, so that we can make sure that everybody's doing what they need to be doing. And then you can see that there's some ethical guidelines involved in research, because research with humans is different than doing like research with chemicals in a laboratory bench. People need to know what it is that they're participating in. In academic studies, there'll be informed consent documents that people actually have to sign that shows that they know they've been told what the study is, what the purpose is, and what they're being asked to do. And so you'll need to consider, do you want those for the research you're doing? And how to keep things private and confidential. And then the ethics also involves being culturally sensitive to the people that you're talking with. And your own issues of your own integrity. You can't just do things in order to get the results you want, but you actually have to be a person of integrity, which we hope a mission information worker would be, but to make sure that it's not just, again, the data come out showing what you want them to show, but that you yourself have followed all the guidelines and techniques that have been set up. And translation is an issue because it's possible that you'll be conducting research among people who speak a different language than you do. If that's the case, then you'll have to translate the research documents into their language, and you'll have to translate the research results back into your language for analysis. So you have to decide, will you use a professional translator? Advantage there is that somebody who has a great knowledge of research and of the area that's being studied. And they can perhaps be more accurate in doing the translation, but they can also be expensive. So you might use someone who's bilingual, who has research knowledge, but they're not a trained translator. You want to make sure that you translate things accurately, both into the target language and back into your language. And again, capture cultural and linguistic nuance. In research on mission, it's easy to lose some of those nuances that can be very important in getting information for mission outreach. And then you need to make sure that the translations are reviewed and edited. Have someone else look at them to make sure that they are really accurate. By having another set of eyes, they can find things that might have been missed by the translator. And then security is something we have to consider. You want to keep data anonymous and confidential so that nobody can find out who the research participants were. That's especially important because often this research is done in high security situations, and you don't want the people who participate to be identified to religious authorities or political authorities. It could cause them great trouble. You have to determine, how will I keep the data safe while I'm traveling? Because you might be traveling to do the research. And especially if you have things like paper notebooks, how will you keep them safe from being seized? How will you keep computers safe from being seized? Encryption can be a way to do that, but encryption can cause problems with, again, with political authorities where it's illegal or frowned upon. So if your computer were seized and it had encryption, it could cause problems. And then how will you handle the theft or loss of data? Do you have backups? Do you have ways to keep people's information safe if the data are lost or stolen? Now, finally, we get to equipping data gatherers and trainers. And so these are really the step before you go out and send people to collect data. It's important to equip the data gatherers in how to ask questions and how to observe things so that they know when to ask more. It's important to train them to know how to keep things safe. All the things that we've talked about up to this time, you do in the training of the data gatherers, but you might actually have trainers who train the data gatherers, people who are trained in research who then can go out and train other people to do the research so that you're not the one responsible for all of that. And finally, we get to the data collection then, where we have trained collectors collectors who have collection instruments following a standard protocol. They go out and gather the data, they interview people, they observe people, and they bring back the results that are then reviewed and can be analyzed to give us the purposes or to give us answers to the questions and purposes of what we're doing. So that's just a brief overview of many of the things you need to consider in data collecting.